First Contact Protocols. The Galactic Coalition had existed for over 12,000 years. 17 sentient species, each having overcome their primitive instincts and violent tendencies, formed what they considered the pinnacle of civilization in the known galaxy. Their society was built on logical principles, efficiency algorithms, and a collective good. Individual sacrifices for the greater benefit weren't just accepted, they were expected. When humans achieved faster-than-light travel, Coalition observers were dispatched immediately. They had been monitoring Earth for centuries, fascinated by the chaotic development of these emotional bipeds who somehow hadn't destroyed themselves despite their turbulent history. First contact occurred in the Proxima Centauri system. The human exploration vessel Odyssey encountered the Coalition monitoring station and, surprisingly, didn't immediately attack it. This alone earned humanity a preliminary evaluation for potential membership. High Admiral Zenith of the Tyranny species commanded the diplomatic mission to Earth. 8 feet tall with iridescent scales and 4 arms, he cut an imposing figure as he addressed the United Earth Council. Your species has demonstrated remarkable technological advancement considering your emotional foundations, Zenith stated, his translator converting his whistling speech into English. The Coalition offers mentorship and eventual membership, should you prove capable of adhering to our principles. The human delegates exchanged glances, trying not to show their discomfort at what many perceived as condescension. "We appreciate the opportunity," replied Ambassador Chen, her voice measured. "Humanity is eager to join the galactic community and learn from your experience." What followed was 6 months of intense negotiations, cultural exchanges, and preliminary integration efforts. The Coalition representatives consistently expressed surprise at human capabilities, while simultaneously dismissing human methodologies as suboptimal or emotionally compromised. Commander Sarah Reeves of the Earth Defense Force found herself assigned as military liaison to the Coalition's first integration fleet. A decorated veteran with a reputation for unorthodox tactics, Reeves watched with growing frustration as Coalition officers dismissed human combat doctrines without proper evaluation. "Your reliance on individual initiative creates unpredictable outcomes," explained Fleet Coordinator Lax, a Meridian whose crystalline body structure housed a consciousness that prided itself on pure logic. "Our battle computers calculate optimal solutions with 99.87% efficiency." Reeves kept her expression neutral. "Sometimes unpredictability is an advantage, Coordinator." "A primitive notion," Lax replied. "Chaos introduces unnecessary risk." The Coalition eventually proposed a joint military exercise to assess human compatibility with their defense protocols. The scenario: a simulated rescue operation on Deimos, Mars' smaller moon, which had been equipped with environmental hazards to test both technological and tactical responses. 20 participants were selected, 12 Coalition specialists from various species and 8 humans from different military branches. Commander Reeves was assigned as the human team leader, while Supreme Tactician Voros of the Insectoid Sith would lead the Coalition forces. The exercise parameters are simple, Voros explained during the pre-mission briefing, his mandibles clicking between words. Rescue the scientific team from the research facility while contending with atmospheric degradation, seismic instability, and defensive systems. What wasn't mentioned, as Reeves would later discover, was that the Coalition had programmed the exercise with hidden variables, unpredictable factors designed to test not just team performance, but adherence to Coalition doctrine. The mission began smoothly. The combined team deployed from the Coalition vessel Unwavering Logic and made planetfall on Deimos in 2 separate shuttles. Initial coordination was impressive, with both human and alien specialists integrating their capabilities effectively. "Grid Sector 3 secure," reported Lieutenant Maya Wong, scanning the research facility's exterior. "No signs of structural compromise. Confirming atmospheric integrity at entry point Delta," added Nautilian specialist Trex, his tentacles manipulating complex scanning equipment. They had successfully penetrated the facility and located the first 3 scientists. training dummies with life signs emitters when the Coalition's hidden variables activated. A simulated catastrophic reactor breach triggered a cascading failure throughout the facility. The environmental systems went haywire, flooding sections with toxic gas, while others experienced extreme temperature fluctuations. Communications became spotty, and the team found themselves separated into 3 groups scattered throughout the facility. Reeves found herself with 2 humans and 1 Sith specialist trapped in the facility's lower levels. Lieutenant Wong's group, consisting of 2 humans and 3 Coalition members, was near the primary exit but cut off by a collapsed passageway. The 3rd group, led by Tactician Voros, contained 1 human engineer and 5 Coalition specialists in the central laboratory complex. All units, report status. Voros commanded over the unreliable comms. After receiving fragmented responses confirming no immediate casualties but significant obstacles to extraction, Voros made an announcement that stunned the human participants. Analysis complete. Optimal solution calculated. Group 2 will proceed to extraction, while Groups 1 and 3 await secondary rescue team. Probability of successful complete extraction, 31.2%. Probability of Group 2 extraction, 94.7%. Reeves couldn't believe what she was hearing. Negative. Tactician. We can reach Wong's position if we bypass the environmental controls on Level 2. Engineer Patel has a plan to neutralize the toxic gas. Unnecessary risk, Voros replied flatly. Coalition protocol dictates preservation of maximum personnel when success probability falls below 40%. Group 2 will extract. Others will await secondary team. Lieutenant Wong's voice crackled over the comm. Commander, we can force the East Service Tunnel and reach your position in approximately 20 minutes. Negative, Voros interrupted. You will proceed to extraction point immediately. This is not a negotiation. There was a long pause before Wong responded. With respect, sir, that's not how we operate. No one gets left behind. The Sith specialist with Reeves, a junior tactician named Krill, turned his compound eyes toward her. Your subordinate refuses a direct order from the mission commander. We don't see it as insubordination, Reeves explained, already working with Paddle to devise an alternative escape route. We see it as upholding our core values. What followed was a remarkable display of human ingenuity and determination that baffled the Coalition observers. Despite direct orders to extract, Wong's team began improvising tools to clear the collapsed passageway. Meanwhile, Reeves and her group managed to override the facility's environmental systems, creating a breathable corridor to the central complex. Engineer Patel, the lone human with Voros' group, began reconfiguring their emergency equipment to neutralize the radiation from the simulated reactor breach, allowing safer passage through the affected areas. This behavior is irrational, Voros declared, watching Patel work. You compromise the mission success rate and violate direct orders. Patel didn't look up from her work. With all due respect, sir, success isn't just about who makes it out. It's about everyone making it out. The exercise controllers aboard the unwavering Logic watched in astonishment as the human team members systematically dismantled the impossible scenario. Using techniques that the Coalition's battle computers had deemed suboptimal or excessively risky, they established new communication links, improvised protective gear, and created pathways through supposedly impassable sections. 3 hours later, against all Coalition projections, all 20 participants emerged from the facility together. The humans were exhausted but triumphant. The Coalition members were puzzled. In the post-exercise debriefing, High Admiral Zenith expressed what the Coalition leadership viewed as serious concerns. The exercise clearly demonstrated fundamental incompatibilities between our approaches, he stated. When Tactician Voros issued the optimal extraction order, human personnel directly contravened established protocols. This behavior endangers the collective and cannot be tolerated within Coalition operations. Commander Reeves stood before the assembled officers, her voice firm. With respect, Admiral, what you see as a liability, we consider our greatest strength. Humans don't calculate acceptable losses when it comes to our people. We don't leave anyone behind if there's even a slight chance of rescue. A primitive emotional response that compromises rational decision-making, countered Fleet Coordinator Lax. Perhaps, Reeves acknowledged. Or perhaps it's why we've survived as a species despite all odds. We don't accept defeat while options remain, no matter how improbable. Admiral Zenith's scales shifted colors, indicating contemplation. This exercise was merely a simulation. In real combat conditions with actual lives at stake, your doctrine would lead to catastrophic casualties. Reeves smiled slightly. That's the thing, Admiral. When human lives are actually at stake, we become even more determined, not less. You haven't seen what we're truly capable of when it matters. None of the Coalition representatives could have anticipated how prophetic those words would prove to be, or how soon they would better adapt to Coalition protocols. It was a decision that would fundamentally alter the Coalition's understanding of humanity, and challenge 12,000 years of established wisdom about what constituted rational behavior in a crisis. The impossible rescue. The unwavering logic glided through the shimmering gases of the Cirrus Nebula, its advanced sensors mapping quantum fluctuations that made this region notoriously difficult to navigate. Captain Ilara of the Solarian species stood on the command deck, her luminescent skin pulsing with satisfaction as the data poured in. The nebula's properties are even more fascinating than our initial model suggested, she noted to High Admiral Zenith. The quantum irregularities create unique properties that could revolutionize our understanding of subspace dynamics. Zenith nodded, his attention divided between the scientific readings and the small human contingent that had been permitted on this mission. Commander Reeves and 3 specialists, Engineer Patel, physicist Dr. Kozlov, and Communications Officer Rodriguez, had been assigned to observe and assist with non-critical systems. The humans have been surprisingly compliant since boarding, Zenith observed quietly. Perhaps they recognize the value of our methods in scientific contexts. Captain Ilara's skin dimmed slightly. They have shown impressive adaptability. Engineer Patel's modifications to our sensor array increased efficiency by 8.3%, using methods our engineers considered unorthodox, but ultimately effective. Interesting, but irrelevant to the larger question of compatibility, Zenith replied. Creative technical solutions do not overcome fundamental philosophical differences. The scientific survey proceeded according to plan until the 3rd day, when the unwavering logic detected an unusual energy signature emanating from within the densest region of the nebula. Analysis suggests an artificial structure, reported Science Officer Malar, their tentacles dancing across the control interfaces, possibly ancient technology, although no records exist of any civilization in this sector. Captain Ilara's decision was immediate. Prepare an exploratory shuttle. This discovery warrants direct investigation. The expedition team consisted of 6 Coalition specialists, and at Dr. Kozlov's request, Engineer Patel, whose expertise with quantum field manipulation might prove useful if the structure contained operational technology. The shuttle Empirical Inquiry departed with little ceremony, equipped with the best Coalition protective technology and communication systems. Its journey into the nebula was meticulously calculated to avoid the most severe quantum disturbances. 2 hours later, as the shuttle approached the mysterious structure, disaster struck. A quantum surge of unprecedented magnitude engulfed the small vessel, overwhelming its shields and sending it spiraling out of control. The last transmission received contained only fragmentary data and the sound of alarms before communications went dead. Emergency protocols activated instantly aboard the unwavering logic. Damage assessment algorithms calculated survival probabilities, while rescue feasibility programs ran simultaneous projections. The results were grim. The shuttle has crashed on an uncharted planetoid within the nebula's core, Science Officer Miller reported, their usually confident voice subdued. Quantum interference has increased by 278% in that sector. Our sensors can barely penetrate the distortion. Fleet Coordinator Lax, who had joined this mission specifically to evaluate human integration, stepped forward. Analysis complete. Rescue feasibility. 12.8%. Survival probability of crash victims without immediate extraction. 27.3% for 6 hours, declining to 8.1% after 12 hours. Admiral Zenith's scales darkened. The calculations are clear. Attempting rescue would endanger the unwavering logic and all aboard for a minimal chance of success. We can't just abandon them. Commander Reeves interjected, her voice tight with controlled emotion. Captain Ilara turned to her. Commander, you misunderstand. We are not abandoning them. We are making the rational decision that coalition protocols dictate in such situations. The many cannot be risked for the few when probabilities fall below acceptable thresholds. The three humans exchanged glances, a silent communication that didn't escape Zenith's notice. Your engineer Patel was aware of the risks, he stated. All coalition personnel accept that in extreme circumstances, sacrifice for the collective good may be necessary. Dr. Kozlov stepped forward, his weathered face showing none of the emotion that must have been coursing through him. Admiral, with respect, we'd like to review the sensor data and rescue projections ourselves. Perhaps there are variables your algorithms haven't considered. Zenith hesitated, then nodded. You may access the data, though I assure you our calculations are comprehensive. We will commence memorial preparations according to the cultural requirements of all involved species. As the command staff dispersed to their duties, Communications Officer Rodriguez leaned toward Reeves and whispered, "They've already written their obituaries. 24 hours, and they'll act like nothing happened." "Not on our watch," Reeves replied softly. What followed was a masterclass in human deception that the Coalition, for all its advanced psychology and behavioral algorithms, was completely unprepared for. While appearing to accept the situation with appropriate solemnity, the humans were systematically gathering information, accessing technical specifications, and formulating a plan that no rational coalition member would ever have conceived. Dr. Kozlov immersed himself in the nebulous quantum physics data, identifying patterns in the seemingly random fluctuations. Rodriguez accessed the communication array, ostensibly to send the tragic news to Earth, but actually to test various signal modulations against the quantum interference. And Commander Reeves engaged Captain Ilara in philosophical discussions about coalition emergency protocols, extracting crucial information about the ship's systems and procedures. 12 hours after the crash, as the coalition leadership had entered the acceptance phase of their loss processing, the humans made their move. Auxiliary Shuttle Bay 3, the smallest and least monitored of the ship's launch facilities, registered an unauthorized access alert. By the time security responded, the bay was empty, its sole emergency shuttle missing. "Explain this," demanded Admiral Zenith as the three humans were brought to the command deck. "I believe your monitoring systems indicate we've taken a shuttle," Reeves replied calmly. "That is obvious," snapped Captain Ilara, her skin flashing with rare emotional display. "Why have you stolen coalition property and violated direct commands?" "We haven't stolen anything," Dr. Kozlov corrected. "We've borrowed a shuttle to rescue our colleague and her crew. We'll return it when we're done." Fleet Coordinator Lax stepped forward, his crystalline form vibrating with what might have been indignation. "Your actions are irrational. The probability calculations don't account for human determination," interrupted Reeves. "Your equations quantify technology, environment, and standard protocols. They don't factor in what humans are willing to do to save our own." "You will die," stated Zenith simply. "The quantum distortions will destroy your shuttle just as they did the empirical inquiry." Rodriguez smiled. "Maybe. But we've modified the shuttle based on Dr. Kozlov's analysis of the quantum patterns. They're not random. They're cyclical on a quantum level. The right shields, modulated to the right frequency, should get us through." The coalition leaders stared at them in bewilderment. The modifications described would require weeks of theoretical modeling and testing before implementation, according to established protocols. The humans had done it in hours, with limited resources and no authorization. The odds remain overwhelmingly against you, Lax insisted. This is emotional irrationality of the highest order. No, Reeves countered. It's humanity at its best. We don't accept acceptable losses when there's even a slim chance of saving everyone. Admiral Zenith's scales shifted to a deep blue, a sign of serious concern. I could order defensive measures to disable your shuttle remotely. You could, acknowledged Reeves, but I don't think you will, because deep down, you're curious. You want to see if we can do what your algorithms say is impossible. And if we succeed, it means there's something fundamentally wrong with how the Coalition approaches risk and rescue. A tense silence fell over the command deck. Finally, Captain Ilara spoke. We will not interfere with your attempt, but we will not be held responsible for the inevitable outcome. Fair enough. Reeves nodded. Just keep monitoring our signal. We'll be back with survivors. The shuttle, hastily christened against all odds by Rodriguez, disappeared into the nebula's swirling gases before anyone could reconsider. Behind it, the unwavering Logic's command staff stood in stunned silence, witnessing what they universally considered to be an act of noble but futile sacrifice. Inside the nebula, conditions were even worse than the Coalition's projections. Quantum fluctuations bombarded the shuttle, causing systems to fail and reality itself to seem unstable around them. Conventional navigation was useless. The sensors couldn't distinguish between solid matter and quantum echoes. This is where Kozlov's crazy idea better work, Rodriguez muttered, hands dancing across the modified communication console he'd cobbled together from spare parts. The physicist nodded grimly, monitoring a device that resembled a 20th century radio more than advanced Coalition technology. The quantum fluctuations follow patterns, like waves. We're riding the trough between them. The modified shields flickered dangerously as they penetrated deeper into the nebula. Twice, the shuttle nearly tore itself apart as reality warped around it. But the humans pressed on, making constant adjustments, pushing both technology and themselves beyond designed limitations. I'm getting something, Rodriguez announced suddenly. Faint but consistent. Emergency beacon. Coalition frequency. The planetoid appeared through the gaseous haze, a desolate rock floating in the quantum storm. The crashed shuttle was visible on its surface, partially buried in loose soil from the impact. There was no movement around it. Life signs, Reeves asked as they maneuvered for landing. Impossible to tell through this interference, Kozlov replied. We'll have to do this the old-fashioned way, with our eyes and ears. The landing was more of a controlled crash, the against-all-odds skidding across the rocky terrain before coming to rest less than 100 meters from the downed empirical inquiry. Emergency vacuum suits, modified with Kozlov's quantum shielding, were their only protection as they exited their shuttle. The scene at the crash site was grim. The Coalition shuttle had broken into 3 sections, with debris scattered across 50 meters. There was no sign of movement. Split up, check each section, Reeves ordered. Rodriguez, see if you can get any systems online for environmental support. What they found defied the Coalition's calculations. 4 of the 7 crew members were alive, unconscious but stable in emergency stasis pods that had activated during the crash. Engineer Patel was among them, a nasty gash across her forehead, but otherwise intact. They're in bad shape but transportable, Reeves reported, checking the vital signs on the stasis pods. The pods are genius. They created localized quantum stable fields, a feature the Coalition apparently didn't factor into their survival calculations, noted Kozlov Riley. Transferring the survivors to their shuttle was grueling work. The quantum fluctuations interfered with gravity itself, making what should have been simple lifting unpredictably difficult. Twice, Rodriguez was nearly crushed when a stasis pod suddenly tripled in perceived weight. Back aboard the unwavering Logic, The command staff watched in astonishment as their sensors detected the shuttle's return journey. According to every calculation, this outcome was impossible. "They're requesting emergency medical support in Shuttle Bay 3, reported a disbelieving communications officer. Admiral Zenith turned to Fleet Coordinator Lax, whose crystalline form had dimmed in what might have been shock. "It seems your probability calculations require revision, Coordinator." The return journey nearly destroyed the against all odds. By the time they docked with the unwavering logic, half the shuttle's systems had failed completely, and the hull integrity was at critical levels. The three humans emerged exhausted but triumphant, escorting the four surviving stasis pods. The Coalition's medical team rushed forward, their efficient movements belying their astonishment. Captain Ilara approached the humans, her luminescent skin pulsing with complex patterns that her species used to express profound confusion. "You succeeded," she stated simply, "against all predicted outcomes." Commander Reeves, her face streaked with sweat and grime, managed a tired smile. "That's kind of our specialty, Captain. Doing the impossible when it matters most." As the survivors were rushed to medical facilities, Admiral Zenith found himself reevaluating 12,000 years of Coalition wisdom regarding what constituted rational behavior in a crisis, and wondering what other impossible feats these unpredictable humans might be capable of. Paradigm shift. The medical bay of the unwavering logic hummed with activity as Coalition medical specialists worked to stabilize the rescued crew members. The survival of anyone from the crashed shuttle challenged fundamental Coalition principles about acceptable risk and resource allocation. Admiral Zenith stood at the observation window, watching the procedures with uncharacteristic silence. His aide, a junior tyranny named Vexel, approached cautiously. "Admiral, the human engineer Patel has regained consciousness. Her condition is listed as stable." Zenith's scales rippled in acknowledgement. "And the others?" "Two are expected to recover fully. Science Officer Miller's prognosis remains uncertain due to extensive neural trauma." The Admiral turned away from the window. "I wish to speak with the humans who conducted the rescue." In a nearby conference room, Commander Reeves, Dr. Kozlov, and Communications Officer Rodriguez had been ordered to wait after receiving basic medical attention for minor injuries. They sat in Coalition-designed chairs that accommodated multiple species, but felt distinctly uncomfortable for human physiology. "Think they'll court-martial us?" Rodriguez asked, stretching his sore muscles. "Difficult to court-martial heroes," Kozlov replied with a shrug. "Though I suspect the Coalition views our actions quite differently." The doors slid open, revealing Admiral Zenith and Captain Ilara. The humans straightened respectfully, but did not stand. "Your physical conditions?" Ilara inquired, her tone professional, but with an undertone of genuine concern that hadn't been present before. "Nothing serious," Reeves responded. "How are our people?" "All four survivors are expected to live," Zenith stated, an outcome that contradicts all established models. The Admiral placed a data crystal on the table which projected detailed schematics of the modified shuttle. "Our engineering team has analyzed your modifications to the emergency shuttle. Their preliminary assessment suggests that your approach should have resulted in catastrophic failure. The quantum shielding modifications violated 17 Coalition safety protocols and utilized theoretically unsound principles. Yet they worked, Dr. Kozlov pointed out quietly. "Yes," admitted Zenith, his scales shifting to an unusual shade that none of the humans could interpret. "They worked. This discrepancy requires explanation." Commander Reeves leaned forward. "There's nothing mystical about it, Admiral. Your models are built on Coalition assumptions, maximizing certainty, minimizing variables, and prioritizing collective welfare over individual risk. Humans operate differently. You improvise," Captain Ilara stated. "It wasn't a question." "We adapt," corrected Kozlov. "Your approach treats unknown variables as threats to be eliminated. We see them as potential opportunities. When I analyzed the quantum fluctuation patterns, I noticed something your systems categorized as irrelevant noise, microsecond stability windows that your sensors dismissed as statistical anomalies. Rodriguez nodded enthusiastically. Same with the communications array. Your systems kept trying to establish a perfect signal through the interference. I built a system that leveraged the interference itself as a carrier wave. Messy but functional. Admiral Zenith's posture suggested deep contemplation. Our post-mission analysis indicates that several of your modifications should not have functioned according to established physical principles. Reeves smiled slightly. Then perhaps your established principles need revision. A long silence fell over the room as the coalition leaders processed this suggestion. For a civilization built on 12,000 years of accumulated wisdom, the idea that fundamental principles might require reconsideration was almost heretical. Captain Ilara finally broke the silence. The broader question remains unanswered. Why? Why risk 3 lives for a 12.8% chance of saving 4? The mathematical logic does not support such a decision. The humans exchanged glances, each recognizing that they had reached a crucial moment in human coalition relations. This wasn't just about a rescue mission. It was about bridging a fundamental philosophical divide. Because we don't see people as numbers, Captain, Reeves explained carefully. We don't calculate a person's value against resource expenditure or probability formulas. Each life is innately precious, not for its utility to the whole, but simply because it exists. A charming but impractical philosophy, Zenith observed. Applied universally, such thinking would paralyze any large-scale operation. Decisions require objective metrics. We're not suggesting abandoning metrics, Kozlov clarified. We're suggesting that your metrics are incomplete. They measure efficiency, resources, and statistical outcomes, but they don't account for human ingenuity, determination, or the psychological impact of abandonment. Rodriguez leaned forward, his expression earnest. When humans know you'll move heaven and earth to save them, they'll do the same for others. It creates a feedback loop of loyalty, innovation, and courage that no algorithm can quantify. Captain Ilara's skin pulsed with thoughtful patterns. You suggest that the emotional commitment to leave no one behind actually improves overall survival rates, despite its apparent mathematical inefficiency. Exactly. Reeves nodded. It's why humans have survived and thrived despite our relatively short evolutionary history. We don't accept limitations when lives are at stake. The conversation was interrupted by a medical alert. Engineer Patel had regained full consciousness and was asking to speak with her rescuers. By coalition protocol, such requests would normally be denied until full medical clearance, but Captain Ilara surprised everyone by immediately granting permission. In the medical bay, Patel lay connected to various monitoring devices. Her face lit up when she saw her fellow humans enter. I knew you'd come, she said, her voice weak but determined. Even when the coalition officers told me rescue was impossible, I knew you wouldn't accept that. Admiral Zenith, who had followed the humans into the medical bay, tilted his head curiously. You expected rescue despite overwhelming mathematical evidence to the contrary. Patel managed a small laugh. Admiral, with all due respect, humans have been defying mathematical odds since we climbed down from trees and decided to walk upright on an African savanna. It's kind of our thing. The recovering coalition officers were watching this exchange with increasing interest. Science Officer Mailer, whose tentacles showed signs of neural damage, gestured for attention. I calculated our deaths, they stated, their voice halting. According to all protocols, the decision to abandon us was correct. Yet I find myself grateful for the human irrationality that led to our rescue. The word grateful hung in the air, an emotional concept rarely expressed in coalition interactions, where duty and efficiency were considered sufficient motivations. Fleet Coordinator Lax, who had been summoned to the medical bay, seemed particularly disturbed by this development. This sentiment is an expected psychological response to trauma. It does not invalidate the mathematical models. Doesn't it? Dr. Kozlov challenged gently. If your models fail to predict both the possibility of our success and the psychological impact of our attempt, perhaps they are fundamentally incomplete. Over the next 3 days, as the unwavering logic journeyed back toward coalition space, an unprecedented series of discussions took place. The ship's senior staff engaged with the humans, not as primitive curiosities to be tolerated, but as beings with a fundamentally different but potentially valuable perspective. Engineer Patel, once released from medical care, joined her colleagues in these discussions. She brought first-hand accounts of how the crashed shuttle survivors had implemented unconventional solutions that extended their survival time beyond coalition projections. We knew the stasis pods weren't designed for extended use in quantum distortion fields, she explained during one session, so we rotated power between them, keeping only 2 fully operational at any time while the others ran on minimal settings. Your protocols would have maintained all pods at equal power until complete failure. Admiral Zenith found himself increasingly fascinated by these deviations from established doctrine. Your approach prioritized unequal resource distribution based on immediate need rather than equal allocation. Equality isn't always equitable, Reeves pointed out. Sometimes the fairest approach is to give different resources to different situations. The discussions culminated in a formal meeting where Admiral Zenith presented findings that would soon rock the entire Galactic Coalition to its core. Our comprehensive analysis of recent events has identified significant limitations in current Coalition emergency response protocols, he announced to the assembled staff. The human rescue operation succeeded through methodologies that our models categorically rejected as non-viable. Captain Ilara's skin glowed with unusual intensity. We proposed the establishment of a new joint research initiative, the Adaptive Response Division, tasked with integrating human unconventional thinking into coalition operational frameworks. This isn't about replacing your protocols, Commander Reeves clarified, seeing the anxiety among some coalition officers. It's about complementing them. Your logical foundations provide stability and efficiency in standard situations. Our approach offers flexibility when standard solutions fail. Fleet Coordinator Lax, who had been the most resistant to human methods, surprised everyone with his next statement. My probability calculations failed to account for variables I deemed irrelevant. This error requires correction. I volunteer to co-lead this research initiative. As the unwavering logic approached coalition space, preparations were made for a formal presentation to the Coalition High Council. The rescue that had been deemed impossible had opened doors previously sealed by 12,000 years of entrenched thinking. In the observation lounge, Commander Reeves found Admiral Zenith contemplating the stars. His scales had settled into a calm blue pattern she hadn't seen before. I've been reviewing human history, he stated without preamble. Your species has repeatedly survived scenarios with statistically negligible success rates. The Coalition dismissed these as historical exaggerations or statistical anomalies. Reeves smiled. We're stubborn that way. Not stubborn, Zenith corrected, turning to face her. Adaptive. Where the Coalition seeks to eliminate variables through standardization, humans embrace variables as potential solutions. It is fascinating. Admiral, can I ask you something personal? Zenith inclined his head in permission. If the roles were reversed, if it had been you stranded on that planetoid, would you have expected rescue against such odds? The Admiral was silent for a long moment. No, I would have accepted my sacrifice as necessary for the collective good. But knowing what I know now, he paused, his scales shifting through complex patterns. I find comfort in the knowledge that humans would attempt my rescue regardless of the odds. That's the thing about us, Reeves said softly. We don't leave our people behind. And once you've served alongside us, you become our people too. 3 weeks later, the Galactic Coalition formally amended its charter for the first time in over 2,000 years. The new provision, referred to informally as the Human Protocol, stated, in scenarios where standard probability models indicate rescue or recovery is unfeasible, Alternative methodologies may be implemented under joint command structures that incorporate diverse problem-solving approaches. It was a small change in wording, but a seismic shift in philosophy. The coalition, which had prided itself on logical consistency for 12 millennia, had acknowledged that sometimes the most logical action was to set logic aside and embrace the seemingly irrational. As the first mixed rescue teams began training under the new protocol, coalition instructors found themselves repeating a phrase that would have been unthinkable months earlier. Sometimes the impossible merely awaits a different approach. And throughout coalition space, a new understanding of humans began to spread, not as primitive emotional beings to be tolerated, but as valuable allies whose greatest strength lay in their refusal to accept defeat when lives hung in the balance. On distant outposts and mighty coalition vessels, alien crews found unexpected comfort in a simple truth. If disaster struck, the humans would come for them, not because it was logical or efficient or mathematically sound, but because that's what humans do. They never leave their own behind. And now, neither would the coalition.